Hello everyone, my name is Ivan Carmona. I'm part of the Biomagnetics Laboratory at the Virginia Commonwealth University. Today we're going to be presenting one of our more recent works toward the increase of the focality in TMS coils called Quadruple Steel 1010 Core Coil for highly focused transcranial magnetic stimulation in small animals. This work has been developed in collaboration between the Department of Mechanical and Nuclear Engineering, the Department of Neurosurgery at the Virginia Commonwealth University, as well as the Maguire Research Institute at the Veteran Affairs Medical Center in Richmond, Virginia. Today, we're going to be talking about the transcranial magnetic stimulation and the role that it has in the stimulation of small animals. Then we're discussing about the focal coils for small animals and introducing our quadruple steel 1010 core coil. Then we're showing the results over a rat head model that we have created to evaluate the coil and presenting the conclusions to remain open to your comments and questions. Transcranial magnetic stimulation is a non-invasive neuromodulation technique used to regulate the synaptic activity of the neurons. It is based on the application of time-varying magnetic fields from outside the head using coils in order to induce the electric fields able to upregulate or downregulate the neuronal activity. This is used to treat several neurological conditions as well as psychiatric disorders. And the good news is that it is nowadays FDA approved for treatment of several conditions such as depression. Currently, there is an increasing interest in the scientific community in using TMS to stimulate small animals, exploiting the similarities that there exist between some animal brains and the human brains. This is in order to understand in a better manner the different human brain networks, but unfortunately, current TMS devices are not designed for small animals. Therefore, more focal coils are required to achieve accuracy in stimulation of very small targets as small as 1 millimeter square. There are different designs available in the literature for TMS coils. Most of them are just reduced version of human TMS coil. However, there is still a need to increase the focality in order to reduce the overstimulation of unintended areas. And one thing that we have observed in the literature is that there is limited use of paramagnetic cores, which is something that we have decided to include in this study. So, in order to create focal stimulation in the primary motor cortex, we have defined a specific point of stimulation and created a spherical head model, which is an approximation of the rat head that allow us to locate the stimulation point using stereotaxis coordinates, as we can see here. The red dot is representing the stimulated point located in the horizontal, coronal, and sagittal plane using the rat brain atlas. The basic configuration that we have used for each simulation is a double solenoid of 50 turns and elliptical cross section, as we can see here. And we have included a ferromagnetic core made of steel 1010, which electromagnetic characteristics are shown in table 1, as well as the figure 9 showing the BH curve for it. Then we have created a simplified spherical rat head model in which we have used 4 types of tissues, and we have followed the same distribution of the different sub-layers as we can see here in the figure 9, and whose electromagnetic properties are shown in table 2. We have placed a configuration of dual solenoids right on top of the head model, and we have defined several second planes in order to see the projections of the magnetic flux lines as well as the distribution of the electric field. The results of the first group of simulation shows the distribution of the magnetic flux density as well as the electric field in the different layers. So if we take a look at the first layer, which is the more superficial defined at C equal to 0, we can see the magnetic flux lines creating a hot spots toward the center here. But as long as we start going deeper in the different layers, we start to see a distribution that is more centrical or concentrical, as we can see here at approximately 4.25 millimeters. Regarding the electric field, we can see a distribution which we have two hotspots that we have called nucleation of charges. The reason why we have called them nucleation is because this is the point where the initial charges are generated by the induction produced by the time varying magnetic field, and these charges are going to propagate downwards, taking advantage of the conductive properties of the material, in this particular case of the tissue. As we can see here, we have two initial groups of charges that are separating, creating a propagation direction that it seems to be opposite in both group of charges, and they are separating each time more, and this is a consequence of the repulsion forces between these charges. So we're going to have a nucleation point, and then we're going to have a target region, and the propagation occurs through a path of highest current density that is going to have two components. It's going to have a radial component and an axial component, and seems to be spreading out through the sides of the target region instead of passing through it. In addition, we have performed several simulations with no core or air core, a flat profile for the steel 1010 core, and a V-shaped profile with tip sharpening that produced several distributions for both the magnetic field and the electric field. As we can see here, the more even distribution for both vector field is produced by the flat profile, a more intermediate case is produced by the air core, whereas a more focal distribution toward the center is produced by the V-shaped profile. Notice the more clear and focal distribution of the nucleation points down here. Now, going back to the migration of the induced charge, we can see a clear differentiation between two groups of charges that are separated from each other and propagating in opposite direction as a result of the repulsion forces. Then we can think of the introduction of two more nucleation points that are going to produce two more differentiated group of charges, and this is going to allow us to obtain a more even distribution in the radial direction of the charges, and therefore if we insert any charge here, it's going to be evenly repulsed by all the charges in the surrounding. Now we introduce our final configuration for a quintuple steel 1010 core coil, which is formed by a quadruple arrangement of peripheral coils whose function is to limit the migration of the charges induced by an additional coil introduced right in the center of the configuration. If we analyze the central solenoid as a single vertical coil, we know that both the magnetic flux density and the current density are going to have a dispersive characteristic that is going to be mainly reflected in the migration of the induced charges that go from the nucleation point trying to reach the target region. Then, if we try to perform the same analysis over the peripheral solenoids, we know that the dispersion is even bigger and over the paths of highest current density that are going to create a conical shape around the target. These paths over this cone are going to be called peripheral paths of highest current density, whereas the one in the middle is going to be called central path of highest current density. Taking into consideration the repulsive forces between charges of the same nature and sign, we're going to see how the dispersion of the charges over the central path are going to change for a more oriented characteristic in a straight line from the nucleation point to the target. We have named this technique oriented control of the current density and therefore of the electric field. The results show radial and axial components for both the current density and the electric field, and mainly axial components for the electric field over the central path with values over the defined threshold of 100 volts per meter at the targeted depths. These values demonstrate the suitability of the design coil to perform stimulation of the M1 and M2 region in rats using the oriented control of the electric field, making the path of highest current density to pass through the target. Thank you for your attention, and we will remain open to receive your questions.